Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Wednesday, and all today's guests are brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. Seas at home this week for a series against Hillsborough. The weekend this weekend catch a Friday nooner. The weekend catch is cod.
Yeah.
Saturday matinee and White Spot Family Fun Sunday, where kids get to run the bases after the game and grab some cod. Sunday is also Bob Brown Bear's birthday, and the first 1,000 fans, 12 and under, receive a stuffy. Now we understand, is that the C's mascot, Bob Brown Bear?
Yeah,
okay.
Bob Brown Bear.
And what, or whatever you said, what's the origin of that name?
I don't know. The only Bob Brown I know is the former GM of the Kamloops Blazers.
Yeah. Check out the full schedule. Check out Bob Brown. Yeah. And get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com or call 604-872-5232. We're joined now by Kevin Woodley from InGoal Magazine and NHL.com. Kevin, thanks for doing this. How are you? Any idea about Bob Brown?
I don't. I'm actually a baseball guy. Baseball is what got me to sports writing and journalism. A little trip to every major league ballpark in the States. In my early 20s and lived in the car and all that stuff. What I really want to know, though, is whether Rick's going to run the bases on Saturday with the kids.
No.
With Bob Brown Bear.
My knee, back, everything's out of
not
whack.
Happening. Well, hold on a sec, Ken. Before we go any further, you take that trip. Which parks stood out? Which were the best? Which were the worst?
I met Ferguson Jenkins. He was a pitching coach for the Cub at the time. So obviously, at the time, the only Canadian in the Hall of Fame. On my, I guess, second stop. First stop when you do a trip like that has to be like cliche and all, Field of Dreams. That's where I went first. Then Milwaukee, then down to Chicago, and met Ferguson Jenkins outside of a Cubs game after and bought him a beer at a pub just kitty corner off the sort of right field corner of Wrigley Field. And have a signed ball up and back in the office here from him and that. And that was actually it was kind of clicked there that like, hey, people actually get paid to watch sports and write about it. I met a writer from the Tribune at the time, and here we are.
So 25 years later. And did anything stand out from a negative point of view?
No,
really?
I can't. I don't remember positives from that long ago. I got to watch the Red Sox clinch the pennant that year, and because I was doing this solo, I got to get these great seats all over the place. And I was, if I remember correctly, like 8 rows up behind home plate when they clinched the pennant that year, and that was a party to enjoy.
We're jealous. You only focus on the positives. What are you doing in the media, Kevin?
Yeah.
We're not all negative, right? Like, come on.
The
truth is, that was a long time ago. I can't remember anything. I'm sure, I lived in my car for 3 months, so I'm pretty sure there were some tough times, but we made her through.
Let's talk hockey. How do you explain the ups and downs of Stuart Skinner?
I would explain it in part through the ups and downs of his team in front of him. I mean, that first game in LA was worse than any single game they played defensively of their entire Stanley Cup playoff run last season to the Cup final in Game 7. Like 14 high danger chances against, almost 5 expected goals against. Like, they're not built for their goaltender to have to bail them out playing loose defensive hockey, and they did in those first 2 games. And so out comes Stu, in comes Calvin Pickard, who, to be honest, the Oilers have played better for defensively all season long. Like, the numbers in terms of environment there's a huge discrepancy. It's the same team, but they play totally different between those 2 goaltenders. So Pickard comes in, they play better defensively, they reestablish that game, and by the time Stu gets back in the Vegas series, they're playing that way on an every night basis. There's been a few blips, and I think the biggest thing for Stuart Skinner, and listen, this is like full credit to him, like the pressure he's under, the spotlight that came with losing the job and all those things, he's managed to sort of reestablish his game. And the strengths of his game are in zone, point-to-point, spot-to-spot goaltending. It's when you get him off the rush that you have problems. Since he came back, let's say, actually, not the first game against Vegas, he came back from Game 4 of the Vegas series, so that's 6 games since. They have given up 10 high-danger chances off the rush. 10. And only one of those was east-west, made him move side to side. In 6 games. 6 of them came in game 1 against Dallas, and you saw what happened in terms of the score. So when they keep it clean off the rush in front of him, they allow him to play to his strengths. And against Vegas and Dallas, two of the best rush teams in hockey this year, they have absolutely shut down anything they've been able to generate off the rush. Nothing high danger last night. It was all mid and low when they did get it off the rush. Stu's made some adjustments in his game. He's not getting caught way out of his crease on those rush chances, but for the most part, they're just not giving up the most dangerous types of rush chances like they were early in the playoffs, which kind of go away from the strengths of his game.
Hey, Woods, a lot of Thatcher Demko talk. He's apparently on a trade board, and everyone thinks he's being traded, but I don't know how you could trade the guy when they haven't even talked contract with his agent about possibly extending him. What's your feel about Demko and his future in Vancouver?
Well, I think both sides can say they want something to happen, but it's going to depend on what that number is. And I think Jim Rutherford said it, like there's risk both ways. There's risk to the Canucks if they commit long-term and big dollar for a goalie that has had difficulty staying healthy. Although by all accounts, his sort of past this injury, as unique as it was. And there's risk on Demko's side. If you play this year out, listen, if he plays this year out, is healthy, plays 40 to 45 games, and plays to the level he did 2 years ago, like he's looking at Jeremy Swayman numbers. Like he's looking at the contract that everybody else has gotten as established, high-level number one goaltenders. Jake Ottinger, $8 million plus. But if he comes back and has another season where he's not healthy or struggles to stay healthy, then what does that contract look like for him as an unrestricted free agent the next year? And so there's risk for him of playing out the season and having another injury-plagued year. And it's where the two sides come out on who wants to take what risk, right? Like if Demko's willing to play for less than that Swayman-Ottinger ticket, then maybe there's a chance this happens. If the Canucks are willing to go to that type of number, which I don't think they would be considering what they've got Lankinen signed for, like it's all going to come down to the number and who's willing to accept what amount of risk. And if it's clear it's not going to happen and that his camp, and I have no idea whether they would be or not, sees that potential for him getting paid like the rest of the elite number ones in the NHL and is willing to accept the risk of next season, then as much as they're a bargain as a tandem this year, and it makes sense to keep him and have two elite goaltenders in a year where you're all in, as far as, after that, you probably can't afford to have him at 8+ and Kevin Lankinen at 4.5. So it'd be interesting. I'm as fascinated as everyone to see how this negotiation goes, because it's really easy to say, I want to be back, we want him back. It's sometimes a lot more difficult to find what that number is going to look like to make it happen.
And then another piece of the puzzle is, where does Silovs fit? He's a big reason why Abbotsford's in the Western Conference Final against Texas. He's been great in the playoffs, but he was great in the playoffs last year, and then he struggled in the NHL. What's his future look like for you?
Well, I mean, to me, Archer's he's shown what he can do at the National Hockey League level on both sides of it, right? Like, I think one of the hardest things that happens to a young goaltender is in the playoffs, your game gets broken down to the nth degree, in a way that it never happens in the regular season. And so the Oilers went to school on some habits he has on distance shots and traffic. And traffic, he's not alone. Like, goalies will tell you it's so purposeful. Look at Connor Hellebuck when the screen numbers went up in the playoffs over the last 2 seasons and how much he struggled with it. Young goalies adjusting to NHL traffic, it's one of the toughest things they have to do. And unfortunately for Arturs, that book got written as that series went on. And then he comes into this year's this year's regular season. I can tell you that the Calgary Flames specifically had it outlined in their pre-scout in terms of how they were going to attack him. And so it's one more thing that he had to figure out maybe faster, or teams were attacking more pointedly on him than they would have if he hadn't had that run in the playoffs last year. In terms of how much he figures it out, listen, it takes time. There are some tracking habits that I think I've seen signs of improvement. But the question is, do you see the Vancouver Canucks, as much as they are all in on needing to win this season and the next 2 seasons, going into a year where Archer Silovs is locked into a job in the National Hockey League, as good as he's been in the playoffs? And even if those improvements are made, do you see any way that they lock him in as one of their NHL goaltenders, just given how last season went for him at the NHL level. I struggle to see that. I think he's perfectly set as a number 3 for you. And if he continues to evolve, and let's not forget, like early in his career, he basically lost 2 years of development to the pandemic and their inability to find him a place to play during those 2 years. So, he's playing some catch up now on the games played side. There's lots of skill. There's lots of talent. There's clear athleticism. And interestingly enough, I'll pull out the props. Justin Pogge, I know the goalie coach in Abbotsford, I hear tons of great things about. When we talk about tracking and how Arturs tracks distance shots, I saw in one of the games after he came back up against Utah, really staying over pucks. And his tendency is to sort of pull off them and make saves and turn his head and sort of make saves back here, especially on the blocker side from distance. And one of the tools that I talked to Arturs about them using, and I haven't been around the Abbotsford Heat to know how much they're using it, but these things. Ooh, fancy goggles, track optics.
Wow.
So somebody I know works with these. And so essentially what it does is it forces you, if you want to see the puck, you have to use binocular vision. And it keeps you down and on the puck and cutting off pucks in front of you rather than that tendency to pull off of them. And that's one of the tendencies that we've seen in his game. And I know he's used them. I'm not sure, honestly, how much of a difference it's made. But, sometimes little things and new philosophies can help sort of find another level. And Arturs seems to have found it here. I still don't think it changes, honestly, their plans for next season with him. I know he requires waivers. And even if he wins a Calder Cup this year, I don't know that he's a guy that teams are going out and claiming off waivers, because if you claim a guy, you got to keep him in the NHL. So I think he stays here as a 3. And I think that's, as much as it's not what he wants, and as much as it's an expensive 3 in a one-way contract, it's a pretty good guy to have as his insurance policy, as we saw last year.
When does the next Terminator come out, Kevin?
I don't know, but I'm clearly trying to get a part.
You're ready to go. You're ready to go.
Hey, listen, I play hockey a couple times a week against guys up to much better levels than and I pull these out for warm-ups, and trust me, I get chirped to the end.
I bet you hear about it.
But listen, some guy named Dustin Wolf uses them religiously. They use them in Calgary. Freddie Anderson uses them. I've got about 8 or 9 guys around the league that are using them. They really sort of set your tracking in your head position for optimal tracking. And so I was encouraged to hear that they're being pulled out every once in a while down in Abbotsford.
Quit using the big words, Kevin. We're not that type of show. You got to dumb it down for us. They work, bottom line.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, my performances at Monday Night Hockey being the exception.
Yeah. You're being hard on yourself. Kevin, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
You bet.